we have incredible people in our communities that are so capable. I want our folks to be able to reach their dreams and not be blocked or barricaded because blank.
Content warnings for this episode include familial rejection, homelessness, houselessness, I'm sorry about that, houselessness, dissociation, plurality, professional academic barriers, suicidality, psychiatric hospitalization, and police misconduct. Genderful would like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples and unceded lands that the producers, host, and guests live and have dwelt upon. Today we honor the Ojibwe and Dakota lands.
The Shawnee lands.
We honor the elders, the plants, the human and animal ancestors of these lands, and celebrate the living descendants of these peoples. May all beings tend these lands for the goodness of the next 7 generations and beyond.
Miati folks, welcome to Genderful, a talk show interviewing gender-diverse folks about their special interests.
The name of our show celebrates that gender expansiveness is wonderful.
Hi, I'm Gender Master, and my pronouns are they, them.
Hi, I'm Atlas of Phoenix, and my pronouns are also they, them. The focus of our show is to interview trans, non-binary, agender, and gender-diverse people regarding their special interests, passion projects, and resources for the gender-diverse community.
We want our audience to know that this show is hosted by 2 folks who also identify as non-binary, transmasculine, neurodivergent, and disabled, with the passion for telling trans stories.
We invite you to remember that we are whole people with robust lives, friendships, challenges, and successes. We love and are loved, and we are delighted to share these stories with you.
As always, we kindly remind our listeners that no person is a monolith of their identities. Your identities can change over time and are valid every step of the way. And if you think you're gender diverse, you are gender diverse. There are no social or medical prerequisites to be included in the community.
Welcome to Genderful episode 86. This week, our guest, Ryder Fox, they, them, is chatting with us about THRIVE Lifeline. Hi, Ryder. How are you today?
Hi, Atlas. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing well.
Okay, great. Let's see here. So THRIVE Lifeline is a trans-owned and volunteer-run crisis support text line that has been operating since June of 2020. Now, let's see here. I have one big question that we're going to just start off as an icebreaker here. What might be things that you can trace back to your youth that indicated that you might be gender diverse one day?
I think I knew from my earliest existence when I had younger siblings and observing how they were treated in different ways based on perceived sex, gender, etc. Those things were always dissonant for me in the way that I was assigned female at birth. And so that, along with every other stereotype that was placed upon me, it just did not resonate. And so very early on, I was like, this is not how I feel. But I didn't have the same kind of language and experiences, et cetera, to be able to articulate just that this is not right for me.
Okay. All right. Do you know about what age that was when you started looking at like the binary and being like, no, I don't know?
Oh gosh, probably as early as 4 and 5 years old. I can, in my conscious memory, I can remember trying to, at that point, I would have seen myself as a binary male because that was the only knowledge of the world that I had as binary gender. And at this point, I identify as a non-binary person. But I remember telling everybody that I was a boy and trying to get people to treat me as a boy and those kinds of things. And I wasn't in a family that was encouraging, was very harmful to me. So it was just a constant struggle to try to be seen for who I am rather than what other people want to define, as I should be.
Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah, I understand that. I'm sorry that was your experience too, but we're going to talk more about how you've thrived since then. How about that? Okay.
Absolutely.
How has your relationship to gender evolved over time?
Oh, so much. I grew up in a religious cult and so had no understanding that was outside of my family's belief system and no interactions with people outside of that belief system. And so my only perception of gender was as it was defined for me by those beliefs. And I was kicked out in my teens and then houseless, and went through, I think, just a period of survival and recognizing how I take care of myself as a human. Not, there's not a lot of gender that was involved in my late teen experiences as much as just survival. And I think I went back and forth through periods of trying to figure out how to be an appropriate female as I understood it, and kind of making, oh my gosh, maybe reparations to my family. If I did this, then they might accept me. If I, behaved in XYZ kinds of ways, then I might be not necessarily let back into my family, but at least not wrong inherently. And so there was this constant struggle of how do I just be okay as a person and be the right kind of person and not have to constantly prove my inherent value. And so anyway, that to say, over my 20s, I was probably doing a lot to accept what is female about me. And that really opened up healing in reverse ways, where I got to love myself in the diverse experience of my gender and things that I don't necessarily take on what you decide, what the outside world decides has to be female or feminine, but I grew to love what is feminine about me. And at the same time, started loving myself enough to say, this is what's masculine about me, and this is who I am within the breadth of gender experience. And so it was to my late 20s and early 30s where I started to really gain language and have more community, where I could start to say I'm actually a non-binary person and live inside of that and start to reflect upon what does a social transition, if that is right for me, what would that look like? Is it about owning? For me, it was first about owning in the language and my own identity, speaking up for myself, gaining my own voice and expression of my gender. And over time, that became looking more at transition and knowing what transition would look like for me. It's again, knowing, I think my early understanding of transition was also very binary. And so what does non-binary experience look like for me? So it's been a constant evolution. And I think I'm in my mid 40s now. As I go forward in life, I think it will continue to be a journey of evolution and embracing myself, loving myself where I am in that moment, and not failing my own voice, just being exactly where I am and speaking into that.
That sounds like a very powerful journey of a lot of contemplation and compartmentalizing for survival. So that sounds really beautiful. The journey it's different for every one of us, whether we choose to be a binary and say that we're a trans man or woman, or we decide to choose transgender, but also non-binary. And so, or just not choose transgender at all, whether you're on HRT or not, and just deciding to be non-binary, even if you have the HRT and the surgeries and all of that stuff. Like, there's no one thing that makes you trans or non-binary or both. And I think your evolution from who you were to who you are now over these last 20 some years, it's very enlightening. It's very beautiful. And I'm just so happy that you've shared so much so far, and we still have more to cover. So I'm excited about that, which is a perfect segue for our editors. Let me switch topics. Thrive Lifeline. How did Thrive Lifeline get started?
It's a long journey as someone who was kicked out in my teens, and I went through my own experiences with suicidality, and knowing that I am inherently wrong was a constant message that I internalized, and that I shouldn't be here and those kinds of things. And so I had my own experiences of not just experiences with suicidality, but gaining a will to live and then a fight to live. I think my story changed from I shouldn't be here belief to I will be here, whether you want me here or not. Just kind of, we call it thriving out of spite. And this I will be me, and I will be here, and I will be whole. And whether these worlds that I exist in want me or not, I will own myself, and I will find and I will create spaces where I can thrive. And I had my own experiences of navigating that in my late teens and early 20s, and over time have just supported so many in my communities who are navigating suicide or houselessness or being put down and told they shouldn't be in some kind of way. And the fallout that comes from the constant experiences that our communities have with marginalization. And so informally have been supporting so many people in my communities. So just trying to keep people alive, trying to keep people whole or inside a space where they know that they matter. And I think that became more formalized for me around 2016. I did not have access to school when I was growing up. I was not allowed to attend school. And so I was in my 30s before I was in a place where I could afford to pursue a community college degree and then later on university, et cetera. And and going back to a university level and working with students who are 20 years younger than I am, and they're facing the same kinds of things. These things just perpetuate decade after decade. And so coming back to a space with folks that are much younger, I was working with folks that were older than I was, and coming back to that space by 2015, 2016, I was navigating students. We had, I think, 8 people in a small LGBTQ2S chapter that attempted suicide in one semester. And we're just, there's too many gaps in resources, and the resources on campus or in local areas were not supportive. And it just comes to this space of it's on us if we're going to stay alive, if we're going to keep our communities alive, our people alive. It is on us, and it shouldn't be on us because we are exhausted just trying to live, a lot of times trying to survive the world that doesn't want to give us the same opportunities, et cetera, but we want our folks to live. And so formally started a crisis team around 2016. And at that point, I was working with another international nonprofit organization. And we trained a team of people. I want to say we might have had 14 people trained by 2020. And we had, with the beginning of the pandemic, the lockdowns that occurred as we all experienced, we, working with student communities, recognized that several of our folks would be maybe put out of the school that could be their only safe space to be. So they may be locked out of school and not have a home to go back to or have a place to go back to that rejects them, that was not safe for them, et cetera. And so we opened up our line as a stopgap, thinking that we have this temporary period of lockdown. And we had, I think, advertised only within our student communities, and we grew too fast with too many people needing the line. And that was March of 2020. And by June, we realized we needed an entire organization to make this sustainable and longer term. And so we opened officially THRIVE Lifeline in June of 2020 to be able to support our communities and to just offer a broader range beyond just students or beyond students in the communities that we started with, to be able to offer that to anybody who needs our support. And we've now been able to serve folks in, I think, 47 different countries at this point, and we have volunteers in 6 different countries. So it's just been an incredible journey of being able to pull together people that just want to help their communities to thrive.
Okay. I'm writing down information because there are some things I want to ask. Like, for instance, before incorporating in June 2020, do you have a single story that you are able to share while protecting this particular individuals? So I'd love to hear that. Like, what is the story that you're willing to share with us?
Can you describe what story you're asking about?
Sure. Well, you have many stories that led to the decision to become incorporated, right? And so what was one story that you'd be willing to share out of all of those stories?
Oh my gosh, I think over and over being told, we're not getting the support that we need, and we're coming here because we heard about you. We have texters all the time tell us, I just needed someone to listen, to affirm me, to not doubt me, to not close the line down on me because I'm not saying things the right way or because my identity, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that's one of the greatest precipitators, not just keeping people alive. We think about crisis lines as a stopgap for life or death. And that often means that if somebody is facing suicide, then the number one goal is to keep them alive. And we as an organization know that's not safe for a lot of people to non-consensually force somebody to stay alive has a lot of other lack of safety around it. And so for us to be able to navigate spaces of support that don't rely just on life and instead to listen to a human being and provide a clear, safe space, a connection to another person that actually affirms them where they are. And I think that is what we started to recognize really set us apart, and what we have, it just is our nature. And that became our mission, is to actually support the wholeness of a person, their cross identity, the intersections of their identities with different marginalizing experiences, to create a space where people can talk about the weight of marginalization, not just quote unquote suicide or not suicide. And that matters, of course, but we recognize that suicide happens, that thoughts of suicide often come up in our communities on a daily basis. It's just a way, it's not a way, it's a constant norm, because folks live in really unsafe, unwhole spaces. And so we want to create a space where we can have conversations about humanity and humanize people, not just focus on whether someone is going to turn from suicide or not, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Life, of course, we want all of our people to live, but life is not our goal above your humanity. Your humanity matters more to us.
Right. I understand that very clearly. Thank you for sharing that. That's a very vulnerable place to be. It's a very vulnerable place to be. You brought up non-consensual. Let's talk about what is non-consensual active rescue and why does THRIVE avoid it? I think it's a great segue.
Non-consensual active rescue, for most lines and many other systems in our world, there is a expectation that if someone has thoughts of suicide, and especially if they have an imminent intent to carry out those thoughts, then police or other medical interventionists will be called on their behalf without their consent. And so if somebody reaches out to a line and says, I have a plan to die in the next day, then immediately services will be sent to wherever they are. And we recognize that is unsafe for too many of our people. It criminalizes, it stigmatizes suicide, it takes away people's autonomy. It often lands them in hospitalization or other programs that dehumanize them, that misgender them, that take away autonomy, further stigmatize and to perpetuate all of the marginalization that they're experiencing in so many ways. And so for us, we want to remove that stigma. We want to humanize, uplift, and create a space where someone can regain their autonomy, regain their voice, and just know that they inherently matter, rather than this sounds, I don't know what this sounds like, but it's not, your life doesn't matter more to me than your humanity matters. And I want you to be able to have the voice of the autonomy to carry out the things that you need to feel most whole. And that has become our mission, I guess.
Okay. That's beautiful. I just want to sit with that for a little bit, because it's less about, like I've been in situations too where I had to go to a psych ward and have been dehumanized in the process, and it is a very dehumanizing process to go to the hospital and to have people that aren't really interested or invested in the people that are actually being brought there, and sometimes against their will, when we were really just looking for someone to talk to that would listen, and that wouldn't try to shape your reality with their reality, thereby completely not listening to you. And you've spent however long talking to them only to find out they were just waiting for you to shut up so that they could interrupt and lay out all this other stuff that doesn't really help, So yeah, I think that's pretty important, to focus on people's humanity versus anything else, because that's who we are first as human beings. So yes, I really feel that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to reiterate, anyone that reaches out to our line, we will listen. We are there to listen. We will not reach out to 911 or other emergency services, depending on where someone's reaching out from, unless somebody explicitly requests that we do so. Okay. So we are trained to listen, to de-escalate, or to help somebody with a safety plan if that's what they're wishing for. And if that's not what they're wishing for, then we're there to listen.
Okay. Well, this is a perfect segue into the next question. You sort of began to cover it, but what can texters expect when they do reach out to THRIVE?
They can expect to have a very personalized, very humanizing conversation. And that conversation can be about anything that they need to discuss. It may be someone that is processing, something that's been going on in their lives. We are not therapists, so I want to make sure that I don't insinuate that we won't be troubleshooting longer term behaviors or how to navigate, advice giving, but we're there to listen. We're there to help someone recenter, regain their own perspective of sometimes when we're processing information, our minds gets overwhelmed that we lose, like, what is it that I want here? How am I going to make the next step? So how can I, if I'm a responder, listen and help you come back to that space where you are comfortable saying, this is what I need, this is what I want, this is what I'm going to do right now. So our job is to help empower folks' voices, help them to slow down just a little bit if that's what they need to do to be able to listen to themselves think. Maybe a conversation that's processing, it may be an active if someone's having a panic attack that's acute or dissociating and needing someone to help them to reground, then we may be helping to ground them. It may be a safety plan or just a self-care plan that we're providing. It may be resources. Somebody might be reaching out saying, I'm trans and I'm not being able to access resources because that's a really tough thing these days. So where can I find those things? What is the process? Or my kid came out as trans and what can I do to support them? But there are a wide variety of marginalized identities and experiences that may come to our line, and we want everybody to, we collect resources and we have responders that the breadth of these identities. And so you will find representation on our line when you reach out, and people that care and understand, not that they will share experiences. They might not have the exact same experience that every single person that reaches out has, but the breadth of identity and experience should be well represented and understood when someone reaches out.
Okay, and that covers folks of color, that covers Indigenous folks, that covers Black folks. Okay, so non-binary, trans mass, trans femme. Okay, all right. So there's a disabled. Yeah. Okay, and plurality too as well.
Yes, we have folks on our team who are plural. We have, I think, more than 5% of our texters identify themselves as plural. We don't ask anybody's identity. It's not ours to know your personal demographic details, but people often share them with us because it helps them to gain the understanding that they need or the resources that they need, or someone, to maybe sometimes testing to know, do we actually understand? Do we actually care? Or is it somebody else that just says, oh yeah, you can reach out here, and then is not a safe space? That's so many, I think, experiences with lines have been this kind of promise that we will be here for you, and then ending up not being a safe space.
Right. That's really important. Looks like we've got a question that just popped in too. Ask me anything here. Let me see here. It's being typed. Okay, Mirami. Mirami has this question for you. Can you help folks navigate finding a therapist or navigate whatever mental health supports are available in their area? Because accessing support isn't always easy or simple.
It is so challenging, and we do a lot of that work. So I appreciate that question. And we're going to do everything that we can to locate resources that are local to you if you want those, or online if that's better for you, if you're looking for someone that really specifically identifies similarly to you or that is local to you. Those can be different. There can be gaps if you're in a local area with individuals that don't identify the same as you do. And so that can be a challenge. Financial access to therapy is already such a barrier. And so we have several resources on our website, in our database, and our responders are all trained to navigate what is the cost barrier to the services that are available, and how can we help to find low cost alternatives or other spaces if therapy is not available because of, whether it's an identity need that's not being met, a financial barrier, et cetera, then are there other spaces? And so there are often community groups and like your own Discord server that our folks would prefer to find space, not to gain the therapy that they need, but to gain community that cares and uplifts them. And sometimes those alternative spaces are more powerful, and sometimes it's the healthcare space. So how can we as responders really recognize what the need is from the texter that we're working with?
Okay. All right. So you can help folks. You have sources to help folks find a therapist. You also have sources to help with financial barriers, like to be able to discuss what the financial barriers are and to find a resource that can help them according to what they can afford and what they cannot afford as well. And then was the other thing, whatever supports are available. You can also help with local and online supports as well. Okay, that sounds really wonderful. That sounds really wonderful. It sounds very ubiquitous. Like there's support that can be from anywhere. And as it looks, it's like you are serving 47 different countries and you have volunteers in 6 different countries. So that's pretty impactful, the work that Thrive is doing. Definitely. Next question. Oh, go ahead. Do you have anything
Oh
else
no,
to
it's,
add?
it's incredible. And at the same time, it sometimes is overwhelming because we know how many gaps in resources there are. And so I appreciate that question. And oftentimes we're having this conversation around, we know there are this many barriers to whether it's this location that somebody is in or this particular need or not having anyone that really gets it. So I want to go to a therapist who understands me. Where can I find that person? Even getting people who are trained and share our identities can be so difficult because there are so many barriers to getting that training and the financial qualifications that go into, et cetera, et cetera. So it's cyclical. It all piles on top of itself. And so we're doing our best to understand exactly what someone needs and then have a really honest conversation around here are the resources that we are finding. If these resources are not meeting your needs, are there alternatives that we can also support with? We have spaces that we can plug you into that will meet those alternatives if there are barriers that are not meeting your needs in other ways.
It sounds like the struggle supports the struggle. You know, Thrive in and of itself struggles to fill very critical gaps that some you're aware of and some that you won't be aware of until someone texts you.
Yeah.
And then you also have people that are struggling that are coming to you. And my guess is like sometimes in sheer panic. And so, yeah, that just makes the work that you're doing that much more necessary. And what I really appreciate is the intentionality behind the work that all of you are trying to do through Thrive. So I really appreciate that. I feel like the less names on the TDR list in October, the better. So that feels good. I have another question for you, unless there's anything else you'd like to add before I move on. Okay. How has the intersection of gender identity with mental health and other marginalized identities impacted Thrive's mission?
I think it's everything. I think when we began, we were a group of queer STEM nerds. And so we had come together as a team underneath an umbrella of a different nonprofit that supports folks who are LGBTQ2S inside of STEM fields. So the science, technology, engineering, math, and medicine. And we recognize how powerful those intersections are and how many gaps there are in resources for this subsection of communities. And at the same time, we recognize that there aren't lines for so many other intersecting identities, and there aren't lines who really understand how intersectionality and multiply marginalized experiences affect a day-to-day life or access to affirming workspaces or school spaces or healthcare daily needs being met. And so I think we started with the expectation that we would be having a lot of conversations around gender identity, support needs, and other maybe dealing with some kind of discrimination as a LGBTQ person. But oftentimes we were finding that our trans and gender non-binary, non-conforming folks would have greater needs and be reaching out most often. But as we shifted to Thrive Lifeline, we recognized that it goes beyond just the LGBTQ2S umbrella. We think about neurodiversity. We think about a variety of different disability experiences. We think about our folks of color, our, like you said, the indigenous communities that aren't being served, et cetera, et cetera. So there are so many gaps in resources and so many intersections of identity that can deepen the experiences that you have with marginalization and broaden the gap to access that gives you an equitable life compared to others that are not facing marginalization due to multiple intersecting identities that aren't supported within traditional society. And so we've become very intentional about having a space that can represent and can be available to the best of our human capacity. We recognize that we are limited. We will never know. No one person will never know all things or be all to all people. So how can we build a team that is as aware and as representative and as supportive of each other, that we grow to recognize our biases and where we can't support people? But how can we offer the best support to folks that aren't finding that support because of their multiply marginalized identities.
There's a lot to consider. Talk about all things considered. There's a lot to consider there. I want to touch back on that, but I want to check in right now to see about a bio break for 3 minutes and then come back.
That's good.
This sounds good? Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a bio break. I was trying to find a way to make it rhyme with patootie, but I wasn't going to be able to pull that off. So I'm really sorry. They have these wonderful friends of mine have made an emoji, like flesh tone emoji of, I found out that the word is called shiny butt is what it's actually called, but like it's a patootie with a little shiny thing on it. And they've made flesh tones, and then they made one that was a rainbow one. I was like, what about a trans one? Honey, come on. And so that's coming too. But like, it just happened. I didn't want to say B-U-T-T, so I just said patootie, and now it's...
Love it.
Okay, so we're just going to take a patootie break. Okay, we'll talk to you in 3 minutes.
Hey, this is Jacko from Stealth, the Transmasculine Podcast. Check out our show, which focuses on the stories of trans men who transitioned before or around the year 2000. Come listen to Jason, who transitioned in 1968, or Jude, who's turning 83 this year. Listen to men of color share their experiences of transitioning into their authentic selves. You can find us on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other streaming platforms, or on our website, transmasculinepodcast.com.
Right, we are back. Okay, so let's jump into this question here. First, I want to thank you for everything prior to break. That was wonderful information. I can't wait to share this episode within my own community here in Minnesota. So that's going to be really exciting. Tell us about other services and supports that Thrive organization provides, please.
Sure. We do a number of workforce development trainings for folks that want to improve their communities, that are supportive, folks with multiply marginalized identities, with marginalized identities in general. So I don't want to make that sound like only intersections of identities, but folks that are trying to improve their communities, whether it's to learn at the basic ally level or to deepen their experience with humanizing their employees and at all levels. We do in-person crisis support. So folks that are wanting to make more inclusive conferences or create spaces where their communities in attending conferences may navigate triggering topics, et cetera, have a place that they can go to talk through those things, or to just know that there's someone there that can support that. So we do event-based support as well. And then our biggest program, that I guess my proudest program, I don't know if it's necessarily our biggest, but we offer an undergraduate internship, and we just recently got a grant to offer paid opportunities. And so as somebody who has been paying for the nonprofit to keep it running, I'm just so grateful to be able to have something that can provide a paid opportunity, a non-volunteer based internship. So for August 2023 to 2024, we're going to be able to offer 5 paid intern opportunities. And the grant does stipulate that it's U.S. undergraduate students, so they have to be eligible to work within the U.S., but folks that want to gain experience with supporting folks with marginalized identities will gain crisis response support, communications, interpersonal relationship development, et cetera, as well as a number of different leadership opportunities and development and professional development in a variety of community education, community organizing, and that kind of thing. So we're really excited to offer this program that it also is built for folks that traditionally face barriers to traditional internships. So it allows folks to work 6 hours per week-ish, about 6 hours per week for about 50 weeks, and still maintain multiple jobs, school, et cetera. We just know folks in our communities are often working multiple jobs, going to school full-time, and caregiving and navigating their own health and well-being, et cetera. And so our internship places people directly with mentors and extends that relationship for 1 year so that they can grow and develop with very personalized development, while also not being required to do 40 hours per week to maintain that job.
Wow. First of all, congratulations on that grant. That is huge.
Thank
That
you
is
so much.
huge. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for those 5 undergrad students to be able to learn more about supporting their community in a way that is mutually beneficial. It's beneficial to them, not just because they're learning it, but also to be part of the community that they're serving. It reinforces their own life experience, their work experience, and everything else that they do, whether it's, like going to school, but the multiple jobs and caregiving and caretaking and receiving care for themselves to maintain their existence here. So I think this is great. That's wonderful. And it's a perfect segue into the next question, which is, you just mentioned that, you've had to pay for Thrive yourself out of pocket. And so how can people support Thrive monetarily or otherwise?
Yeah, we have a variety, I think, within our Instagram links and the link tree. Sorry, I am in my 40s, so I'm not the most conversant around. But we have Facebook fundraisers, PayPal, Venmo, etc., where you can make financial donations, and we receive, dollars donations. We are a community of people in our communities that are helping us take care of ourselves. So we are, so deeply grateful for donations of all sizes. And beyond that, if somebody has more to give and wants to support a student or have training at their work location, et cetera, then those are services that we can provide that help us to put more towards our communities. Everything that we get goes directly to service for our communities. We're outside of the undergrads that we'll be able to pay, and we'll offer one internship coordinator position. I'm excited to be able to give folks to our organization's completely volunteer based. So we know how much free labor goes into expected of our communities. And it's a hard thing to ask for more free labor, but that's how our organization subsists, is with each other. And so outside of that, we are all, here as volunteers taking care of this organization and helping our communities to thrive.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I feel like our particular isolated demographic, yes, we tend to give a lot because we need to get things up and going and off the ground. And I know Gender Meowster has been doing the show for a little over 2 years now and has had, to do things by themselves for a while. And then I'm assuming, I think within the last year and a half, they've been able to get help. And we've just been able to just pour into it as we can, the level that we can give. And it's helped this become what it is now. So we totally understand where you're coming from. What are some goals you have for the future of Thrive?
More paid opportunities for our folks. This doesn't serve everything. So often our people in our communities are told they're not welcome into spaces because they don't have the right pedigree, the right training, the right anything. That list can go on. And so I'll just say the right blank. And so we are deeply passionate about making sure people have very clear skills that can't be denied and very clear experiences in their resumes, and teach them how to, outline their resumes in ways that just cannot continue to be denied, because we can't thrive out in the world if we keep being denied. Right? And so if I provide more and more, there's no way we can take care of every single person, but my own blood, sweat, and tears will go to as many paid opportunities as possible, because I am just sick of having our folks turned away and treated as less than for any of the variety of reasons. And we have incredible people in our communities that are so capable. And so I want our folks to be able to reach their dreams, outside of this small space, wherever that is in their world, that they can go after those things and not be blocked or barricaded because blank.
Because blank, yes.
Because all the things.
Because of all the things that start with the word blank, yes. Blanking times, yes. So this is fantastic. It sounds like there's just so much more yet ahead for Thrive.
Hopes. Thank you. We'd love to keep growing. We'd love to support more texters. We'd love for folks not to need crisis support. And at the same time, we want that support to be available and to be affirming when people do. And we recognize that, we're all going to need somebody at some point. And so I just love for more folks to know that we're there, and our team is deeply passionate and will humanize you and whatever your needs are. So of course we want that to grow, while we also want to recognize that it shouldn't have to be this way. We shouldn't have to, go outside looking for support because the world is so cruel on a daily basis. But knowing that that is the case, knowing that there are people that get it and people that will be there alongside you in that journey is what we want to continue to provide.
Okay, thank you. I just noticed up here that this is actually an acronym. Is that
I'm sorry?
correct? That THRIVE is an acronym?
It is an acronym. Sorry. I heard admin. Yes, it is an acronym because
Can you tell us what the acronym is,
yeah,
please? Thank
it
you.
is Thriving Harnesses Respect, Inclusion, and Vested Empathy. And it's a very intentional acronym, really kind of pointing fingers at this idea that more and more inside of professional or academic spaces, there's this push for DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. Sometimes other words are added into that, and they're often checking boxes and saying, okay, I got one of you, I got one of you, I got one of you, look at me, I'm diverse, wasn't that great? And not changing the systems, not changing the environment. And our folks are more harmed and facing greater perpetual marginalization and then leaving spaces because it's not safe to be there. It's more harmful to be inside these spaces. And so rather than check a box and say, look at us, we are diverse, like actually, what does that mean? It means respect, it means inclusion, it means having a vested interest in you as a human being growing to the state that you want to be and elevating you into leadership or whatever your dreams are. And so for us, it's a very intentional act of knowing and supporting each individual human being for who they are, where they are, and what their voice is.
Okay. I do have one question left. It's a concluding question, but before we go here, but maybe it is a concluding question in and of itself. This is very much in alignment with your particular journey, having been in a place where you were not allowed to thrive, and then having to do all of this work between your 20s and 40s to find out what you enjoyed about your feminine self, what you enjoyed about your masculine self, and then to synthesize these things to create Ryder Fox today. And so the question that I have, how have you thrived? That would lead you to do this. Yeah. So how have you thrived?
It's one day at a time. Sometimes it's each season, each hardship that I go through, clawing myself out on my fingernails. Sometimes I've not had, the mentorship access or the people providing financial support or whatever people, my like biological family, et cetera. And so I've created those chosen families. I've created those spaces. I have owned a business now since 2007 and built client relationships, et cetera, et cetera. So I create those spaces that mirror what I needed in some ways, but also listen, because it's not just about what I need, but, listen to the world around me and create a space that engages with the variety of voices and needs that I come in contact with, and really being able to build those relationships in a way where I see people growing confident in themselves helps me come back and reflect on what other things do I want to do to become confident in myself. And it just, I put that out, it comes back. I put it out, it comes back. And
kind of like a mirror.
Exactly.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. Is there anything else that we've missed about Thrive Lifeline that you'd like to make sure that you say?
I don't know. Maybe in volunteer opportunities, they are broad and diverse. We can do small project volunteering. So I think it's easy to think of a crisis line as the volunteers are crisis responders, which is true, but there are so many opportunities for other types of volunteering that don't have the same depth of emotional labor or time investments. And so we have a breadth of opportunities, and I'm more than happy to help provide opportunities that are, personalized to someone's needs, not the boxes that you might.
The blank boxes. Yeah. Okay. No more blank boxes like wire coat hangers. Okay. Can you share an experience with gender euphoria?
Oh my gosh. This is small in some ways, but I have said this a few times when people ask me this question because it became so big for me. I didn't realize how little I laughed in my life like actually laughed out loud until my voice started changing. And I would hear myself laugh, and I would hear myself laugh and laugh loud and like take up space in some kind of way that I had never really in my life. And I didn't realize how little I laughed, or, you know, I already knew how invisible I was. I kind of made a career out of being invisible for a while.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to do that, but to suddenly not just like take up space, but to have joy in my daily life in small things that just became audible to me and then present to me because I became aware of them and those kinds of things. So just to laugh was a huge experience with gender euphoria for me, and to be more present, I think, was one of my most conscious, like, wow, and I didn't expect that. So of course I've had euphoria around clothing, and euphoria like the first time I had a naked chest in public and those kinds of things. But truly for me to laugh out loud and to have joy, you know, that I wasn't expecting. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was not a part of my life in so many ways. And it has become a very, you know, and now I'm told I'm too loud. Sometimes when I'm laughing, I'm ridiculous.
Oh, I love it. I feel like one of my gender euphoric moments was last August going to see Peaches here in Minneapolis. And this is my second time seeing Peaches. And I was up against the stage, like center stage. And I don't know, I had my cowboy hat on, I had this hat on, and all of a sudden I was like, what Peaches? And I was just like enjoying myself. And I was like, this is not how we do concerts. You sit up against the speaker and just kind of move, but like here you are being active. And it's really like the small things that, you know, that have allowed me to come out of my shell. You know, I think it's the way that, at least for speaking as a mass person, the way that we're socialized as girls to be, you know, demure and back, you know, and if you have an opinion, then you're a feminist, and that's an issue in and of itself. And so, you know, I think that's great that, you know, being bare-chested in public brings you gender euphoria, but also the laughter that you're able to it's just able to come out of you now. I think that's beautiful. It is the little things, but these little things, they're magnificently huge.
Yeah.
They're transcendent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see here. What would you like to make sure that folks know about your perspective on gender and non-binary trans issues?
There's just no one way, no right way. I think you kind of alluded to that earlier as well. There's no matter how deep my understanding might be for the number of different conversations that I've had, I'm never going to fully understand or another person's. I will not say that I will fully understand anybody's experience with gender, but I understand at greater depths those that I've had greater conversations with, right? And that still is something I recognize that will not be expansive enough to fully understand the breadth of gender experiences. And there's no one thing that we should be pushing for, are pushing for. Hopefully there's no limit on how you can experience gender or how that can evolve over time. And I think that there's such a pressure to think of gender again as the binary, but beyond that lens to trans being from one place to another place, and it's just a halting here to there. And that is absolutely a valid journey, and there's so many expanses in between that and around that and on the other side of it and somewhere behind you, and there's
right.
And so I think that the no one way or no right way to gender, and then even knowing in yourself, I think sometimes even giving ourselves permission. I am somebody who has had a diverse set of experiences in my own experience with gender, and yet I can still be like, oh no, I shouldn't wear that. That's really too something, too feminine, or it's too masculine, or it's too something. And it's like, but why? Why am I thinking that?
I know.
Why am I putting that pressure on myself? But
that's my favorite new thing, is questioning myself. Yes.
And so how can we, constantly be open to the nuance and the experience that comes up to us that we didn't expect, and the ways that it might play out, and how can we, love ourselves enough to really be as expansive as we need to be, or, as like today, I just want to fit right inside this because that's where I am. And tomorrow,
Right.
if that grows or if that changes, or,
Yeah.
and so
It's
how
like
that permission.
fluctuating with your every moment. Yeah. And being present with that fluctuation. Wow. That's amazing. Okay. Well, Ryder, thank you for riding through the storms and helping so many people. I really appreciate that. And to learn more about Thrive Lifeline, you can go to their Linktree. It's be Linktree, Thrive, all in caps, Lifeline, L is capitalized. And here's this week's cloud or query that you can answer on social media platforms. What does thriving look like to you? All right. Coming next week, there is no Genderful, but on May 1st, our guest will be Alex Lantafee, they, them, and we are going to be discussing neurodivergence, gender, and sexuality, my 3 favorite subjects.
Genderful would like to thank our guest for being on this podcast. If you'd like to catch us live, join us on Mondays at twitch.tv/gendermeowster. Show notes will appear in the edited version of the show on Fridays on both YouTube and podcasting platforms.
If you have a question you would like the host to answer, or gender diverse and would like to request an interview, please send an email to genderfulpodcast@gmail.com or sign up via the website at genderfulpodcast.com.
As a gender diverse community, the Clatter wants to assure our listeners that we are prepared to moderate our spaces. We will get positive and negative feedback on these shows and topics, and we have a moderation team on our channels, socials, and Discord server ready to deal with this.
Please join our Discord server at discord.gg/meowster to meet the community and get a regular digest of solidarity resources. You can also support us with subscriptions on Patreon, following and reviewing us on your favorite podcasting platform, or engaging with our posts and content on social media at GenderfulPod and at GenderMeowster.
You could take a few moments to also rate the show. We will post any 5-star reviews on our socials, so get creative. Mention a special interest of your own, a project you're working on, or even say hi to your comfort person in your review. What power!
This show is made possible by volunteers, tips, and subscriptions. Shout out to the folks helping us coordinate guests, edit the podcast, moderate the live chat, and post on our socials.
Artist credit for Genderful. Genderful's theme song is called Hope by Free Range Megs, aka Soma. The Gender Meowster logo was designed by That's Barnaby and edited with consent by Transgriffin. Genderful's pre-show is wrangled by JuiceTex. Genderful is edited and mixed by Transgriffin and Alexis Vandam. Genderful's social media is managed by Queer to Help. Genderful is hosted by Atlas O Phoenix and Gender Meowster. Genderful is the intellectual property of Gender Meowster. All rights reserved. Trans rights are human rights.
That's right.